The morning Amara Johnson decided to rehearse her revenge speech in front of a stranger's car window was the same morning her entire life changed. She had no way of knowing that this singular action of Shakespearean soliloquy would become her future. If you're ready for a story about unstoppable confidence and the kind of love that sneaks up on you when you're too busy, being magnificent to notice, hit that subscribe button, like and share to other story lovers now. Because this journey, it's going to crack you up in the best possible way. 3 days. That's how long Amara had allowed herself to cry after losing her job. 3 days of sweatpants, ice cream straight from the container, and playing Beyoncé's Sorry on repeat until her neighbors probably considered calling a wellness check. On the 4th day, she woke up angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that burns out quickly. No, this was the cold, calculated fury that makes a woman dangerous. The kind that makes her put on her best suit, practice her smile in the mirror, and decide that the only acceptable response to betrayal is excellence. Kelvin had done this, her ex-boyfriend, the man who'd once claimed to love her ambition until that ambition started outshining his own mediocrity. The man who'd smiled in her face while using his new girlfriend's family connections to have her quietly removed from her position at Morrison Associates. No explanation, no warning, just a sterile email. Your services are no longer required. Amara had built that HR department from chaos into efficiency. She'd implemented systems that saved the company millions. She'd mentored junior staff, resolved conflicts that others said were impossible, and done it all while being the only Black woman in senior leadership who didn't code switch or shrink herself to make others comfortable. And Kelvin, discount version Adonis with his average credit score and below average emotional intelligence, had taken it all away because he couldn't stand watching her shine. But Amara Ngozi Johnson didn't stay down. She couldn't afford to. She was the first person in her family to earn a master's degree, the daughter of a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Giving up wasn't in her DNA, so she'd applied to Titan Holdings. The application process had been rigorous. 3 rounds of preliminary screenings, a written assessment, and now finally the in-person interview. Titan Holdings wasn't just any company, it was the company. The kind of place where careers were made, where the coffee was probably imported from some exclusive Ethiopian mountain, and where the CEO was so elusive that most employees had never even seen him in person. Amara had researched everything she could find. The company valued innovation, integrity, and results. They had a reputation for promoting from within and actually practicing the diversity and inclusion policies that other companies just printed on glossy brochures. This was her shot, her chance to rebuild, to prove that Kelvin's sabotage was nothing more than a temporary setback in a story that was far from over. She stood now across the street from the Titan Holdings Tower, a gleaming structure of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the morning sky. Her reflection in a nearby shop window showed a woman who looked powerful, polished, and ready. Tailored navy pantsuit that hugged her curves perfectly, silk blouse and cream that complemented her deep ebony skin. Hair swept up in an elegant high puff that said professional but whispered, "Don't try me." Makeup subtle but flawless. Defined brows, clear gloss, just enough highlight to catch the light. She looked good. She knew she looked good, but her stomach was still doing acrobatics. The interview was in 15 minutes. She'd arrived early, too early, and now had time to kill and anxiety to manage. Her therapist's voice echoed in her head. When you're nervous, ground yourself. Find your center. Amara took a deep breath and glanced around the street. That's when she spotted it. A sleek black luxury car parked at the curb, its tinted windows dark as midnight. The glass was so perfectly reflective it was like looking into an expensive mirror. Perfect. She walked over, checking her appearance one final time. Everything was in place. Professional, confident, untouchable. And then, without planning to, without meaning to, she started talking. "Okay, Amara," she whispered to her reflection. "You've got this. You walk in there. You show them exactly who you are, and when you get this job, when. Not if you're going to call that sorry excuse for a man and tell him exactly what you think." Her reflection stared back at her, and suddenly the words just started flowing. All the hurt, all the anger, all the brilliant, cutting things she'd been composing in her head for 3 days came pouring out. "Kelvin," she said, her voice rising slightly, "you discount version Adonis with your mediocre ambitions and your fragile ego, I hope you're Next job is wiping the tears of all the women you disappoint, because baby, that's going to be a full-time position. She gestured dramatically, her hands cutting through the air like she was conducting an orchestra of insults. You thought you could dim my light? You thought sabotaging my career would make you feel bigger? Newsflash. You could stand on a ladder made of all your insecurities and still not reach the level of adequate man. Amara was really getting into it now, pacing slightly, her voice full of the kind of righteous indignation that would make a preacher proud. I am Amara Johnson, and I am about to be too busy signing checks, making decisions, and living my best life to even remember how to spell your name. And when you see me thriving, and you will see me thriving, I want you to know that every success, every promotion, every moment of joy I experience is happening in a reality where you don't matter. Amara was so caught up in her performance that she didn't notice the window beginning to descend. Didn't see the slight movement behind the tinted glass. And one more thing. The window slid down completely. Amara's words died in her throat. Inside the car, leaning back against butter-soft leather, was a man. Not just any man. A man who looked like he'd been carved from marble by an artist who understood that perfection could be intimidating. Steel blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, covered in the kind of perfectly even stubble that suggested either incredible genetics or a very expensive grooming routine. Dark hair styled with casual precision, a suit that probably cost more than her rent. And he was looking at her. Really looking at her. Not the way men usually looked when they were trying to undress her with their eyes or reduce her to a body. No, he was looking at her the way someone looks at a painting they can't quite figure out. Captivated, curious, completely arrested. And he was smiling. Not smirking, not mocking. Smiling like he'd just witnessed the most entertaining thing he'd seen in years. Amara felt her soul try to leave her body. She started, her voice climbing 3 octaves. This isn't... The man's smile widened slightly, revealing perfect white teeth. When he spoke, his voice was deep, smooth, with an undertone of barely contained amusement. Please, he said, don't stop on my account. The part about wiping tears was particularly inspired. Amara's face went hot. She could feel the heat spreading from her cheeks down her neck, probably making her glow like a traffic light. I am so sorry, she stammered. I thought the car was empty. It's been a really weird week, and I have this interview, and I was just practicing some. Emotional, stretching, like vocal warm-ups, but for feelings. She was babbling. She knew she was babbling. She couldn't stop babbling. The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. An interview? Yes, at Titan Holdings, which is right there. She pointed at the building like he might not know where his own car was parked. I'm actually running late now because I've been standing here having a breakdown in front of your car, like a complete... You're not late, he interrupted gently. You have 13 minutes. How did he know that? Right, okay, well, I'm going to go now and possibly change my name and move to another country. It was mortifying meeting you. I mean, not mortifying. You seem lovely. I'm mortifying. Goodbye! She spun on her heel and practically ran toward the building, her heart hammering so hard she was worried it might crack a rib. Behind her, still sitting in his car, Dorian Alexander Saint. James watched her go with something that felt suspiciously like wonder blooming in his chest. In 34 years of life, he'd met thousands of people. He'd sat across from world leaders, negotiated with billionaires, been pursued by women whose beauty was their profession. He'd been bored by all of it, the practiced smiles, the calculated conversations, the way people performed their personalities like auditions for a role in his life. But this woman, this gorgeous, expressive, unfiltered woman who just accidentally performed a breakup monologue for him like he was her personal audience, she was real, unscripted, completely, magnificently herself. He'd noticed her the moment she approached his car, though she hadn't known he was inside. He'd been on a call, about to tell his assistant to bring the car around, when she'd walked up to use his window as a mirror. And then she'd started talking, and he'd been absolutely enchanted. The way her face transformed with each emotion. Anger, sass, triumph, disgust. The way her hands moved through the air, punctuating her words like exclamation points. The way her voice carried conviction and humor in equal measure. the way she stood there, magnificent in her fury, tearing down some fool who'd clearly never deserved her in the first place. Dorian had forgotten about his call, forgotten about the meeting he was supposed to be preparing for. Forgotten everything except the woman outside his window who was teaching him that he'd been wrong about something fundamental. He'd thought he'd experienced attraction before. He'd thought he understood what it meant to be interested in someone. He'd been wrong. This feeling of his entire attention narrowing to a single point, of wanting to know everything about someone, of being unable to look away, this was new. And when she'd frozen, mortified, those expressive brown eyes going wide with horror, he'd felt something else he didn't recognize, the desire to make her smile instead of running away. He watched until she disappeared into the building, then leaned forward and spoke to his driver. "Marcus, we are interviewing candidates today?" "Yes, sir. You have several things on your schedule, so you can't be bothered by such trivial information." Dorian smiled slowly. "Cancel my morning meetings. I'm sitting in on the HR interviews personally." Marcus, who'd been driving for Dorian for 7 years and thought nothing could surprise him anymore, actually turned around in his seat. "Sir?" "For observation purposes," Dorian added, his smile widening slightly. "I want to ensure we're hiring the best candidates." "Of course, sir." Dorian settled back against the leather seat, already anticipating the moment when Amara Johnson walked into that interview room and realized exactly who'd been in the car. This was going to be interesting. Amara's hands were shaking as she checked in at the reception desk. The lobby of Titan Holdings was everything she'd imagined. Soaring ceilings, modern art that probably cost more than her student loans, and enough marble to make a Greek temple jealous. Everyone moved with purpose, dressed in that effortlessly expensive way that said, "I don't try, I just naturally look like I stepped out of a magazine." She felt out of place and perfectly in place at the same time. Out of place because this level of wealth was foreign to her world. In place because she'd earned the right to be here, and she knew it. "Ms. Johnson?" A young woman with a tablet and a smile approached. "I'm Sarah. I'll be escorting you to the interview room. Follow me, please." They took an elevator to the 23rd floor. Sarah made polite small talk. The weather, the building's architecture, how Titan Holdings had been voted one of the best places to work for 3 years running. Amara responded on autopilot, her mind still partially in the parking lot, still replaying the horrifying moment when that window had slid down. Who was that man? He'd been too well dressed to be just anyone, maybe a board member? An investor. Please, God, let him not be on the interview panel. Sarah led her down a quiet hallway and stopped outside a large conference room with glass walls. Through them, Amara could see 4 people already seated around a long table, 3 women and 1 empty chair. "They're just waiting for the last panelist," Sarah explained. "He's running a minute behind." "Can I get you some water? Coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." Sarah disappeared, and Amara took a moment to center herself. "You've got this," she thought. "You're brilliant. You're qualified. You're exactly what they're looking for. And you did not just humiliate yourself in front of some random stranger in a car. Except, the elevator dinged behind her. Amara turned instinctively, and her heart stopped. Walking down the hallway toward her, looking somehow even more devastating in motion than he had sitting still, was the man from the car. No. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to question your place in any room. His suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, moved with him like it was part of his body. His eyes found hers immediately, and that same slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. Amara felt her soul trying to evacuate her body again. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his deep voice sending shivers down her spine. What a pleasant surprise. She couldn't speak, literally couldn't form words. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out except a small sound that might have been a whimper. He extended his hand. "Dorian St. James. I don't believe I properly introduced myself earlier. St. James, as in the St. James family that owned half the city's real estate?" The St. James whose name was literally on the building? Amara mechanically took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and somehow gentle all at once. Electricity shot up her arm. This is... She stopped, closed her eyes, took a breath. When she opened them again, she forced herself to meet his gaze directly. "Mr. St. James, I sincerely apologize for my behavior earlier. It was completely unprofessional and inappropriate. Was it? He still hadn't let go of her hand. I found it rather refreshing. Refreshing, she repeated flatly. His thumb brushed almost imperceptibly across her knuckles before he released her hand. Shall we? He opened the door to the conference room, gesturing for her to enter first. This couldn't be happening. This could not actually be happening. Amara walked into the room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The three women at the table smiled warmly at her. Genuine smiles, not the competitive ones she'd gotten used to at her old job. Amara Johnson, welcome, said the woman at the head of the table, a black woman in her 50s with graceful locks and eyes that missed nothing. I'm Dr. Patricia Morrison, Chief People Officer. This is Jennifer Chen, Director of Talent Acquisition, and Michaela Brown, Senior HR Business Partner. Amara shook hands with each of them, her professional autopilot finally kicking in. She could do this. She'd prepared for this. And Mr. St. James, Dr. Morrison continued, with a note of something surprise? Curiosity, in her voice, has decided to join us for observation purposes. Indeed, Dorian said, taking the seat directly across from where Amara would sit. I like to stay, involved in key hires. The way he said key hires made it sound like he'd already decided she was key to something. Amara sat, crossed her ankles, placed her portfolio on the table, and channeled every ounce of composure her mother had ever taught her. The interview began normally enough. Dr. Morrison walked through Amara's resume, asking about her experience at Morrison Associates, her approach to conflict resolution, her philosophy on workplace culture. Amara answered each question thoroughly, professionally, weaving in specific examples and quantifiable results. She could feel herself settling into her element. This was her expertise, her passion. This was where she shined. But every time she made a point, every time she turned a page in her portfolio, she could feel Dorian's eyes on her. Not in a predatory way, more like he was studying her, learning her, memorizing her. It was intensely distracting and somehow motivating at the same time. 30 minutes in, after she'd successfully navigated questions about change management and diversity initiatives, Dorian spoke for the first time. Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice cutting smoothly through the conversation. Can you give me an example of how you handle interpersonal conflict? Specifically, situations where someone has, let's say, underestimated you. Was he referencing her speech? Amara met his eyes directly. Two could play this game. Absolutely, she said, a hint of that morning's fire creeping into her tone. In my experience, Mr. St. James, being underestimated is often a gift. It allows you to exceed expectations, so dramatically that people have no choice but to reassess their initial judgment. His eyes gleamed. Interesting? Can you elaborate? Well, for instance, I once worked with a colleague who assumed that because I was young and, let's be honest, because of how I look, that I wouldn't be capable of handling a particularly difficult employee relations case. This colleague actively tried to sideline me from the process. How did you respond? I documented everything, built my case thoroughly, and when the time came, I presented a resolution strategy so comprehensive that the executive team not only approved it immediately, but also assigned me to lead similar cases going forward. The colleague who'd tried to undermine me ended up reporting to me 6 months later. Poetic justice, Dorian murmured, that almost smile playing at his lips. I prefer to think of it as earned justice, Mr. St. James. The three women on the panel were watching this exchange with barely concealed fascination. Dr. Morrison's eyebrows had climbed halfway up her forehead. Ms. Johnson, Dorian continued, leaning forward slightly, would you say you're skilled at? How did you put it earlier? Performance monologues during tense situations? Amara felt her face heat up, but she refused to back down. I'd say I'm skilled at clear communication in high-pressure environments, yes, though I try to ensure my audience is actually present and aware they're part of the conversation. A laugh escaped him, quick, genuine, and absolutely devastating. The sound did things to Amara's nervous system that should probably be illegal. Dr. Morrison cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps we should move on to the case study portion? The next hour passed in what felt like minutes. They presented Amara with a complex scenario involving a harassment complaint, potential litigation, and departmental politics. She dissected it methodically, asking clarifying questions, identifying stakeholders, outlining a step-by-step approach that balanced legal compliance with human dignity. She was in her element now, too focused on the work to be self-conscious. This was what she'd trained for, what she was born to do, creating spaces where people could be safe, valued, heard. When she finished her presentation, there was a moment of silence. Then Dr. Morrison smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. "That was exceptional, Amara, truly exceptional." Jennifer and Michaela nodded their agreement, making notes on their tablets. Dorian said nothing, just watched her with those intense blue eyes that seemed to see past every wall she'd ever built. "Do you have any questions for us?" Dr. Morrison asked. Amara had prepared several, of course. She asked about the company's approach to professional development, their metrics for measuring employee satisfaction, their plans for expanding their diversity initiatives. But what she really wanted to ask, what she couldn't ask, was why Dorian St. James, billionaire CEO, had sat through an hour-long HR interview when he probably had 100 more important things to do. Finally, Dr. Morrison stood, signaling the end. "Thank you so much for your time, Amara. We'll be making our decision within the next few days, and we'll be in touch." Amara stood, shaking hands again, gathering her things. She was proud of herself. She'd held it together, answered brilliantly, maybe even impressed them. She was almost to the door when Dorian's voice stopped her. "Ms. Johnson." She turned. He'd stood as well and somehow seemed taller than before, or maybe the room had just gotten smaller. "Yes, Mr. St. James?" "That speech you were practicing this morning," he said, and his voice had dropped to something lower, more intimate. "I hope you get the chance to deliver it, though perhaps via voicemail. I imagine the visual aids were integral to the full effect." Amara didn't know whether to laugh or die of embarrassment. "I'll take that under advisement." "Do that." He paused, then added, "You were brilliant today." It wasn't the words that got her. It was the way he said them. Simple, direct, like he was stating a fact about the sky being blue or water being wet. "Thank you," she managed. And then, because her legs remembered how to work, she walked out of that room with her head held high and her heart hammering like it was trying to escape her chest. If you're as emotionally invested in Amara and Dorian's story as I am, you know what to do. That subscribe button is waiting for you. Because trust me, what happens next? You're not ready. I wasn't ready. Nobody was ready. But we're going there anyway. Amara made it outside before the adrenaline crash hit. Her hands shook as she walked, and before she could stop herself, she was laughing, the kind of slightly unhinged laughter that comes after surviving something that should have killed you but didn't. She'd just interviewed for her dream job. In front of the CEO who'd watched her rehearse a revenge speech against her ex-boyfriend. The CEO who was possibly the most attractive man she'd ever seen in real life. The CEO who'd looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in his very expensive world. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend, Simone. "How did it go?" Amara typed back. "I don't even know where to start." "Call you when I get home." The drive back to her apartment passed in a blur. She'd moved to a modest one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood after the breakup with Kelvin. She'd lived with him before, which had been a mistake she was still paying for in the form of having to start over furniture-wise. But it was hers. Small, cozy, filled with plants she managed not to kill, and art from local Black artists she'd discovered at weekend markets. It was a space that felt like her, smelled like her signature, vanilla and sandalwood candles looked like home. She changed out of her interview suit into leggings and an oversized Howard University sweatshirt, made herself tea, and finally called Simone. "Girl," Simone answered, not bothering with hello. "Talk." Amara told her everything, from the car window disaster to the interview itself to the way Dorian St. James had looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to spend time solving. Wait, Simone interrupted. "Dorian St. James? The Dorian St. James? The one who's on the cover of Forbes like every other month? The one they call the Ice King because no one can ever get a read on him?" "Apparently he thaws when you accidentally perform a one-woman show for him," Amara said dryly. "Amara girl, do you understand what this means? That I should never leave my house again? That you've got a billionaire interested. Do you know how many women would kill for this? Simone, I want a job, not a husband, especially not a husband who probably dates supermodels and actresses. But did you see the way he looked at you?" "I saw the way he probably looks at everyone," amused. Like we're all entertainment. Or, Simone countered, he looks at everyone else bored and he looked at you actually interested. Amara wanted to believe that, more than she wanted to admit. The next 3 days were torture. She tried to keep busy, updated her portfolio, researched other potential opportunities, just in case. Avoided social media, where Kelvin kept trying to view her stories, and worked out until her body was too tired to let her mind spiral. But at night, alone in her apartment, she kept replaying the interview, Dorian's voice. His eyes, the way he'd said you were brilliant, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. On the 4th day, her phone rang. Unknown number. Amara's heart leaped into her throat. Hello? Amara Johnson, speaking. This is Dr. Patricia Morrison from Titan Holdings. Do you have a moment to talk? Amara's hands started shaking. She sat down on her couch. Her cat, a gray tabby named Basquiat, immediately jumping into her lap. Yes, of course. I'll get straight to the point. We'd like to offer you the position. Not as a senior HR specialist, but as HR director for our corporate relations division. Amara forgot how to breathe. What? The panel was unanimously impressed with your experience, your approach, and your vision. This is a significant step up from what we advertised, which comes with appropriate compensation, benefits, and a direct report structure to our Chief People Officer. I'm emailing you the formal offer now, but I wanted to call personally to tell you, we want you on our team, Amara. Tears were streaming down Amara's face before she realized she was crying. Not sad tears. Overwhelmed, grateful, triumphant tears. Dr. Morrison, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely yes. Patricia laughed warmly. Excellent. Check your email for all the details. Your start date is 2 weeks from Monday. Welcome to Titan Holdings, Director Johnson. After she hung up, Amara sat in stunned silence for exactly 15 seconds. Then she screamed, a full, uninhibited scream of pure joy that probably terrified her neighbors and made Basquiat flee under the bed. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Not just gotten a job, gotten a better job. A promotion, a title, a future. Kelvin had tried to destroy her, and she'd risen from the ashes like a phoenix in stilettos. She called Simone, called her mother, texted her mentor from grad school. Each conversation was a celebration, a reminder that she'd earned this, that she deserved this. And then, sitting at her laptop reviewing the offer letter with its generous salary and comprehensive benefits, Amara felt the old anger rising again. Kelvin. She pulled up his number, the one she'd kept blocked since the breakup. Her finger hovered over the unblock button. Simone's voice echoed in her head. Don't give him the satisfaction of knowing he still has any space in your head. But Amara didn't want to give him satisfaction. She wanted him to know, to really know, that his attempt to ruin her had failed spectacularly. She unblocked him and started typing, then stopped. Then started again. What did you say to someone who'd betrayed you so completely? How did you convey that they'd failed without making it seem like you'd been keeping score? In the end, she didn't send anything, because Simone was right. The best revenge wasn't a message. It was living well. It was showing up to her new job in 2 weeks, and being so excellent that any whispers about her past would be drowned out by evidence of her present. Kelvin didn't deserve her words. He didn't deserve any piece of her energy. He was a footnote. And footnotes don't get to know how the story ends. Amara's first day at Titan Holdings felt surreal. She arrived at 7:45 a.m., early enough to settle in, late enough not to seem desperate. Security had her badge ready, personalized with her name and title, Director Johnson. Every time she looked at it, something warm bloomed in her chest. Her office was on the 24th floor, a real office with walls and a door, not a cubicle. Windows overlooked the city, letting in natural light that made everything feel possible. The furniture was modern, comfortable. There was even a plant on the corner of her desk, a peace lily with a welcome card from Dr. Morrison. She was setting up her computer when Patricia knocked on her open door. Settling in? Getting there, Amara said, standing. Thank you again for this opportunity. You earned it. Patricia stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Amara's stomach tightened. Okay, Mr. Saint. James specifically requested that your division report through a direct line to executive leadership. It's unusual for him to take such an active interest in organizational structure. Amara didn't know what to say to that. Patricia's eyes were kind but searching. He also asked, very casually mind you, when your start date was. Twice? I don't. I'm not sure what that means. Neither am I exactly, Patricia admitted. But Dorian St. James doesn't do anything casually. Just be aware. And for what it's worth, you reporting through me means you have an ally if you ever need one. After Patricia left, Amara sat at her desk feeling like she'd been given information she didn't know how to process. Dorian St. James was interested in when she started, had structured her reporting line personally. Why? She didn't have time to overthink it. Her calendar was full of introductory meetings. She spent the day meeting her team, 3 talented HR generalists who seemed genuinely excited to have her as their director, reviewing ongoing projects, and familiarizing herself with Titan Holdings' policies and culture. By lunch, she was exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. She was eating a salad in her office, reviewing an employee engagement survey, when there was a knock at her door. "Come in," she called, expecting one of her team members. Dorian St. James stepped into her office. Amara nearly choked on a cherry tomato. He looked unfairly good. 3-piece suit in midnight blue, hair styled perfectly, those blue eyes finding hers immediately. He was carrying 2 coffee cups. "Director Johnson," he said, and there was something almost playful in his tone. "I heard it was your first day. Thought you might need this?" He set one of the cups on her desk. The scent hit her immediately. Caramel latte with an extra shot of espresso, exactly how she liked it. "How did you know?" "I may have asked someone," he admitted, leaning against her doorframe in a way that should not have been as attractive as it was. "How's your first day going?" Amara blinked at him. The CEO of the entire company was standing in her office, making small talk, having brought her exactly the right coffee. "It's going well, thank you, for the coffee, and for—" She gestured vaguely at the office, the windows, everything. "You earned this position," he said, echoing Patricia's words. "Your interview was one of the most impressive I've ever sat through. Even the part where I accidentally performed a dramatic monologue for you?" His lips quirked up, especially that part. They looked at each other, and Amara felt that same electric pull from the interview, like the air between them was charged with something she didn't have a name for. "I should let you get back to work," Dorian said, but he didn't move. "And you probably have very important CEO things to do," Amara said, but she didn't look away. "Probably." He straightened. "Welcome to Titan Holdings, Amara." The way he said her first name, like he was tasting it, testing how it felt, made her skin tingle. After he left, Amara stared at the closed door for a full minute. Then she picked up her phone and texted Simone. "Girl, he brought me coffee." Simone's response was immediate. "I told you. That man is interested. He's my boss's boss's boss." This is a complication, or it's a situation. A delicious, complicated situation. Amara set her phone down and tried to focus on work, but the coffee was still warm in her hands, and the memory of how he'd looked at her was still warm everywhere else. Thank you for listening. What do you think will happen next? Find out more in the 2nd episode coming up very soon. If you're new here, we'd love to know you better, so subscribe and leave us a comment of where you're watching from. See you next time!